Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Our program is about to begin. If you could all please rise for the family coming in. Thank you.
When you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I am on your side when times get rough and friends just can't be found. Like a bridge over troubled waters, I will lay me down. Like a bridge over troubled waters, I will lay me down.
You may be seated. On behalf of the Enns family, I want to thank you for your attendance today, in person or joining us online, as we gather to celebrate and honor the life of Douglas Enns. In doing so, we may experience moments of grief as we feel his loss, and celebration as we honor a life well lived. I want to encourage us all to embrace these moments and the ones to come in the days ahead, as they are evidence of your lives being touched by his. My name is Elizabeth Melvin, and I serve as a district chaplain with the RCMP. Charmaine and I met over a decade ago when I joined Citizens on Patrol. It didn't take long for us to connect as friends, and our friendship has become very dear to me over the years. I was deeply saddened when the diagnosis of Doug having cancer came. He fought hard to stay here with us, and throughout his journey, he continued to do what he did best, to make his days count. As I stand before you today, it is a privilege to celebrate his life, as Doug was truly a great man. I would like to take this time to invite you to join me in prayer in whatever way your faith tradition celebrates prayer. Also, to those who, for whatever reason, are not disposed to pray, to please use this time for silent reflection or a moment of contemplation. Heavenly Father, we are gathered here both to celebrate a life well lived and to grieve the loss of Douglas Enns. Many hearts are hurting and in need of your comfort as we continue to come to terms with his passing. We ask that you would be with us throughout this time and in the many days to come. In Jesus' name, amen. I'd like to welcome a great family friend, Andrea Ray, to come and share a few words with us.
You'll have to forgive my Birkenstocks. I thought I was going to be standing on like a big oak podium can see my feet, but here we are. This poem I'm about to read especially resonated with Doug after he was diagnosed with cancer. He reflected on the sacrifices of his health and well-being on the job and whether they may have contributed to his disease. It's called the Sheepdog's Prayer. Sheepdogs live to protect the flock. The knights of old were men of honor who used their might for right. Today they're known as sheepdogs, those who carry on the fight. I'm a tired old sheepdog, the guardian of my flock. I keep the predators at bay and stand watch around the clock. Please stop the sheep from pulling my teeth. I'll need them for the fight. When the hungry wolves come calling, some dark and deadly night. I pray I'll never need my gun, but someday if I do, may my cause be just, my draw be quick, and my aim be ever true. Heaven holds a special place for those who do the deed, defenders of the innocent in their hour of need. May the sheep someday be grateful, there's a debt they cannot pay, to the sheepdogs who lay it on the line each and every day. I am proud to be a sheepdog, I've done my very best. I'll stand my watch until my maker calls me home to rest. But when I meet St. Peter, there's just one request I'll make. Please let me spend eternity standing guard at heaven's gate. Lord, help us bring this age of sheep to a rapid end, then fill this land with sheepdogs, men of honor once again. This prayer is dedicated to those who bravely face the dangers all around us, to make our world a safer place. To the soldiers, the cops, and warriors, sheepdogs through and through, thank you for your service and your sacrifices too. Doug was born in, as Doug would say, a humble little Mennonite town in the mountains of Saskatchewan on July 10th, 1964. He passed away on June 21st, 2023. We all gather here today 3 days before Doug would have turned 59. Doug was the first child of Arnie and Deanna Enns. 3 years later, Doug's sister Cindy was born. Deanna and Cindy are seated here today with us. Sadly, Doug's father, Arnie, predeceased Doug just a year ago. Doug would have said he was a cute kid, well-behaved, and all the more handsome after he found someone's fedora in a ditch and proudly wore it everywhere thereafter. Doug was blessed with 4 magnificent children, Janelle and Brandon, who live in Newfoundland and are watching on live stream today, and Doug and Charmaine's girls, Ashley and Alyssa. Doug's daughter Janelle was born in 1991, and his son Brandon was born in 1994. Doug deeply cherished his children, and proudly spoke of them always. Doug was also blessed with 3 precious young grandchildren, Sadie, Charlie, and Jude, who also live in Newfoundland. Doug loved to show off photos of his grandchildren whenever he could. Doug and Charmaine have loved each other for 28 years. August 18th of this year would have been their 22nd wedding anniversary. Doug and Charmaine met while working security at the Royal Alexandra Hospital. They became good friends, having many things in common, such as their interest in law enforcement and both liking Van Halen, although Doug preferred David Lee Roth, while Charmaine preferred Sammy Hagar. This was the subject of banter for many years to come. For some couples, a fun night might involve dinner and a movie, but for Doug and Charmaine, a fun night involved working a weekend in emergency at the Royal Alex, dealing with the misbehaving guests wandering the halls of the Royal Alex. During this time, Charmaine saw the potential in Doug to be a great police officer and encouraged him, or more likely lovingly nagged him, to apply to police service. In 1997, Doug went through training to work as a corrections officer for Corrections Canada at the Edmonton Max. 2.5 years later, Doug sat Charmaine down and announced to her that not only had he secretly applied to the RCMP, he had been accepted, and in just a few short weeks, he needed to report to RCMP Depot for 6 months. Every Friday during those 6 months, Doug would drive the 8 hours home to Charmaine to see her for the weekend, needing to leave by Sunday at noon each week to get back to Regina in time to prepare for the next busy week and maybe get some sleep. In return for Doug making these trips back and forth each weekend, Charmaine had to do Doug's laundry and iron his uniform shirts and his blues, just so to ensure that they would pass inspection every week. It has often been said that Doug was clever and smart, but also a little stubborn. Some may even say more than a little. After being taught how to make his barracks bed perfectly, Doug decided thereafter to sleep on top of the already made bed with just a blanket, so there was less work in the morning for his bed to pass inspection. And I think that there's several of us in here that have done this very thing just to save 25 seconds in the morning and to avoid in LA. Doug graduated from Depot in November of 2000 and was on to his first post in Ponoka. Doug and Charmaine loved their time in Ponoka. In 2003, Doug and Charmaine welcomed their first daughter, Ashley, to the world, and in 2006, they were blessed with another daughter, Alyssa. You said that was supposed to calm me down? It's not. I'm in the cardio zone. Doug worked general duty in Ponoka until 2007, when he became an investigator in Ponoka's new GIS, General Investigation Section, or as Doug would call it, Drugs and Thugs. For 6 years, with his own unique sense of humor, Doug wrote the police blotter for the local Ponoka newspaper, which garnered many fans and rave reviews for its hilarious depictions of the escapades of the Ponoka RCMP. Doug's articles were being shared on blogs and being read by people from all over the world. Some excerpts have been included on the program before you. In February 2009, Doug was transferred to the St. Albert RCMP detachment, and he and Charmaine moved their family to Morinville. Doug was promoted to corporal in 2011 and later to sergeant in 2017. Doug was a watch commander for most of those years. He was well known as a great mentor with a wisdom and calmness that inspired those he worked with. Doug had great respect for the RCMP and took great pride in being there for his members. Doug and Charmaine spent many happy summers with the girls at the cabin at Lac Sante and Vincent Lake, both near St. Paul, Alberta. For 3 weeks each summer, Doug and the girls enjoyed the sunny lakefront and visits with family and friends in the peaceful lake setting that they loved. In December 2019, Doug was diagnosed with stage 4 esophageal cancer. In the face of a daunting diagnosis, Doug strived to keep everything as normal as possible. Doug started radiation treatment and then chemo treatments. For several months, Doug continued to work and insisted on driving himself to his treatments so that he could return to work immediately after. I worked with Doug when he was first diagnosed, and I know that he remained himself. He exhibited strength, resilience, and unwavering courage. He maintained his dry, sarcastic, wicked humor and his stoic ways. He would come to work with tales of Charmaine and her internet searches to find holistic approaches to fighting this fight on top of modern medicine and chemotherapy. This initially started with celery juice and evolved from there. Clay and I would go to his office, to Doug's office for our briefing, and mostly just to see what sort of potion Charmaine had come up with. We would see this murky, muddy concoction in a magic bullet cup sitting on the desk, and we would sympathetically ask, "Did Charmaine make this?" And Doug would answer with a resigned sigh, "Yes." And it would usually follow with something like, "She says she's trying to keep me around longer, but I really think that this is going to kill me." Clay and I would leave him to it because nobody wanted to be in that office, that tiny office, with a man that had 3 weeks worth of experimental vegetables coursing through his bowels. Doug often thought that he was the boss, that he was the man of the house, but we clearly knew Charmaine was the boss because Clay and I would always just suggest, like, "Why don't you just dump it out, man? Like, she's not gonna know." And his response was always like, "No, I cannot dump it out. No, she'll know." Oh, poor guy. Although Doug began chemo and radiation while we were working, he stayed with us. I don't know why, especially when everyone these days seemed to be looking for a reason not to show up. He did it, and he did it maybe for us, and it was maybe for him, and it was maybe for his family. But his team noticed that he fought through it. One of the other supervisors, who didn't normally work with Doug, had asked me, "I saw Doug clicking something in his pocket. Is it his chemo?" And none of us are doctors or nurses, so I knew that it was one of his TENS machines, because he had always, once he started chemo or radiation, he was always in pain, so he had one of those TENS machines that he had a remote control that he just would constantly be clicking on. So this person had thought that he had one of those patient-controlled pumps that was just dumping morphine into his body. So Doug and I just went with it and told everybody that he's just on a patient-controlled pump. So I was never concerned because I knew Doug would always do his job. And in my mind, who better to manage a critical incident with immediate action and clarity and calm than someone taking unfettered hits of morphine throughout the day? Doug stayed in the fight for a long time, and he always wanted to help and to contribute. He would go to the chemo in the morning, then come work nights with us, faithfully listening to the AM radio broadcasts of the Oilers, scoring 6 goals, but then losing 7-6 because we haven't had good goaltending since the 80s. Or most likely, he would talk about his girls. He always talked about his girls, and he always talked about his grandkids. We always knew what the girls were up to and what they achieved those days. He was sick, but he always showed up, and he always contributed. I remember one evening, Steve and Falak were bringing in a rowdy client to the cell block, and they'd asked for a second member, because a couple extra members. So Clay and I was this big burly native member, just a big strapping lad. He and I go into the cell to help these guys, and I think Dan, you were in there. And then there's Doug, wearing a pair of loose-fitting sweatpants, ASIC runners, and a blue jacket he bought on Amazon, waiting for his time to throw hands with this guy. And Clay and I are just looking at each other like, what is he doing in here? Like, he looks sick, not sure if it was because of the celery juice or the chemo, but he wants to help, so he's standing there. He's got like one fist curled and the other one on his like TENS machine, like upping the intensity on it. And this client's just ready to, and Ryan, I did not have client written there. It was a different word. But the boss is here, so this client's looking at Clay, this big boy. I'm just wondering, like, I'm newly promoted, so I'm thinking for sure I'm getting fired because our cancer-stricken watch commander's fighting somebody in the back cells. Dan's just waiting for his time to throw hands too, and also I'm thinking, and I wish Jeff were here, but I'm also thinking, like, what is Jeff going to say when he finds out? He's going to be so disappointed. And we all knew that Doug always had Jeff's sanity in the palm of his hand, always just waiting to let it go. And yeah, that's another story. I'm probably short for time here. Poor Jeff. So we'll always have those memories of Doug strolling into the back cells in sweatpants, ready to throw hands. With the support of Charmaine, Ashley, Alyssa, and other family and friends, Doug was able to continue working and achieve his goals of living as normally as possible until COVID restrictions forced him to take a medical leave of absence from work. Unimpressed, Doug counted the days and months until he was about to return to work, and then worked for a while until February of 2021, when it was discovered that Doug's cancer had metastasized to his brain. Doug had surgery to remove a golf ball-sized brain tumor from his right frontal lobe. In the summer of 2021, Doug, Charmaine, Ashley, and Alyssa were thrilled to be able to travel to Newfoundland to visit with Janelle and Brandon and Doug's grandchildren. Doug, Charmaine, and the girls were so thankful that Doug was well enough to make the trip, and they will have those special moments forever and those special memories from that visit. Doug continued to relentlessly fight the disease through the fall and winter, and in March 2022, he made the tough decision to take a medical retirement from the job he loved so many years. In July 2022, Charmaine took a caregiver's leave from work to care for Doug full-time. Doug continued to have numerous medical appointments and chemo treatments to attend. In October 2022, Doug decided to stop all cancer treatments. The chemo was taking its toll, and he battled pneumonia for several weeks. Doug was strong, and for a time, as the chemo cleared of his body, he became a little stronger. During his time off at home and in the company of his cat, Lucy, Doug built Lego sets, assembled model cars, and watched a whole lot of Fox News and baking channels. You didn't have baking channels, but there was a lot of baking. There's a lot of cookie championships in there. On April 25th, 2023, Doug became a resident of Foyer-Lacombe Hospice in St. Albert. Charmaine would spend time with Doug every day, and the girls would go visit almost every day. Doug's mother, sister, family, and friends would visit Doug too. On Father's Day, Doug began to sleep most of the day, every day, and evening. On June 20th, Charmaine, the girls, and Deanna stayed overnight at the hospice to be by Doug's side. The girls played one of Doug's favorite movies, Star Wars: A New Hope. As everyone settled in, so Doug could hear it playing in the background. At about 5:30 a.m. in the morning of June 21st, 2023, Doug passed away peacefully with his mom, his wife, and his daughters by his side. Staff at hospice and the St. Albert detachment arranged for a special send-off. His mom, Deanna, Charmaine, the girls, Cindy, and a few family members, friends, and RCMP members, as well as hospice staff, joined in the processional walk from Doug's room through the halls and to the doors where the hearse awaited. 3 police vehicles with lights activated escorted Doug to Sturgeon Memorial in Bon Accord, just as he would have loved and he much deserved. Doug is deeply missed by his friends, family, and coworkers. I would like Falak to come up, and she'd just like to share a few stories from some of the members that Doug had impacted over the years.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start off by saying that I know Doug was all about the humor, but I'm actually very sentimental and I'm not funny at all, so I'm going to try to keep this as light as possible. I want to start off by saying that I'm really honored to speak on behalf of Doug's final watch, Watch 3. I was Doug's youngest, most junior, and last recruit on his team before he retired. And I'm grateful that I'm in the position to speak about one of the best supervisors the RCMP has ever had. When I was in the 7th grade, my teacher made me and my classmates do an activity on the last day. She told the whole class that she was going to give us all a paper with our names written on it, and she wanted us all to write one word that described us. And her goal at the end of it all was to take each person's name, write down the words that most frequently came up. So for example, if 7 out of 25 people said that Emily was kind, that was a word beside her name. By the end of that activity, each student would have their names and at least 10 words that described them. She gifted us each that small paper and told us to read those words every time we were feeling down and needed to be cheered up. I still have mine till this day. I wish I had the chance to gift this small paper to Doug, but I'll pass it along to his lovely family so they can remember these words that describe Sergeant Enns as a police officer and supervisor. I asked my fellow colleagues to give me stories and words that best describe Doug, and here are the top 10 words that came the most when describing Sergeant Doug Enns as a supervisor. A leader, supportive, funny, courageous, knowledgeable, loyal, understanding, motivating, resilient, and a survivor. These 10 words that embody Sergeant Doug Enns as a supervisor, but I can assure you that this list can go on. No matter what paragraph I read or member I spoke to, we can all confidently say that Doug was the type of boss that, as a future supervisor, made you want to emulate how he treated and led his members. Not by words, but by his actions. Doug made sure he knew he was a member's member and would let members be cops because you knew he had your back. He was a perfect balance of giving you enough room to make your own choices, but made sure to keep you on track. He always had your back, even if you didn't deserve it sometimes. He was a perfect mentor because he'd seen it all, and he would always be there to answer any questions that we had. Doug was the type to show up at any call, even if it meant him throwing his vest and belt over his sweatpants. He was always the first one to show up and help. Doug always supported everyone's growth no matter what, short or not. If you wanted that course, Doug put you on it. He wanted his team to grow and continue to learn. I still remember I was at 1 year service, and Doug pulled me into his office and told me that a GIS position came out. He said, all the 7 other constables are applying for this, so I better see your CV as well. I laughed and said, Doug, I'm only at a year's service. And I remember him laughing and saying, so what? Years of service doesn't matter. It's your grit, passion, and motivation that needs to be there. And you best believe he reviewed my CV the following week. I remember when the job board closed and a member was selected, he especially pulled me into his office to tell me how impressed he was at my CV at 1 year service. I teared up that day because I had a supervisor that motivated me to never be fearful of trying. If you fail, so what? If you don't make it, so what? At least you tried, and that's what matters. That's the type of supervisor Sergeant Doug Enns was. Although we're sad that we lost such an incredible leader, we are grateful that Doug left his mark and reminded us all, both members, junior and senior, what an influential, supportive, and dedicated supervisor Doug was. And although you may not physically be here, you'll always be remembered. We all know that this isn't a goodbye and just to see you later. And in old Doug fashion, with his classic phrase, "See you tomorrow, gang." Thank you.
Thank you both for the kind words. Alyssa, if I can get you to come up front. She's going to share with us a tribute to Dad by Ashley and Alyssa, and then a tribute to Dad written by Janelle and Brandon.
The first tribute I'm going to read was written by Ashley and myself. Hey Dad, we could really use your help. You have helped us write every important thing in our lives. From speeches to text messages, applications to essays, you have helped us with them all. And now we are faced with writing what feels like the most important thing ever. And now we have never wished for your help more. How do we pay tribute to the greatest dad in only a few minutes? How do we write this in a way that does you justice? Of course, we feel a bit of pressure. Well, not a bit, a lot. Trying to write a tribute that lives up to your natural writing talent. There have been so many times we wanted to ask how to word something just right. Ask your advice. Is this idea stupid? What about this? There are so many things we could say, and we don't want to miss anything. We just don't know how to say it. We are still trying to figure out how to talk about you in the past tense. So, Dad, how do we tell them that you were the most supportive dad that anyone could ask for? How you would rearrange your schedule so you could come to every karate tournament and test, watch all of Valley's basketball games, catch every awards night, and every single dance recital. We always loved when you showed up in your uniform. It made us feel, well, let's be honest, cooler than everyone else. We think you lived vicariously through us in our karate endeavors. You never had a black belt yourself, but you still coached us quietly during water breaks after sparring matches, gave us pre-test pep talks and post-tournament debriefs. When you would barbecue outside, you would always cheer us on while we practiced karate in the grass. A couple times, you even tried to teach and demonstrate a tornado kick, and we were thinking to ourselves, isn't he a little too old for this? Dad, how do we tell them about all the fun we had together? How you made the most mundane things fun and memorable, and we wish we could tell you how much those things meant to us. You made our breakfast every morning, and it was always in the shape of a smiley face. 2 Eggos for eyes and a banana for a mouth. Remember that one winter break when we became regulars at the flea market? When we would go on a hunt for a new Star Wars figure or a katana sword or flip through rows of comic books? Remember the super sketchy mini donuts? Dad, how do we tell them you always knew the right thing to say? How you could make us giggle even in the darkest, saddest moments. You were a master in the art of insults. You had this keen ability to deliver the most searing roast without using a single bad word in a way that wasn't always immediately obvious. If someone was bothering either of us at school, we would count on you to set us up with a comeback that we could never repeat, but would always make us laugh anyway. We are so happy to have 6 years' worth of blotter stories from you. Infused with your wit, nerdy references, sarcasm, and amusing use of alliteration, see what we did there? Reading the blotter very quickly brings your voice back to us. Dad, how do we tell them that we had the coolest dad ever? You were such a nerd, but the cool kind, of course, and you knew so much about anything and everything. You were passionate about so many things and shared them all with us. Movies, TV shows, books, music. We are so lucky we have so many things to remember you by. We were so proud of you. Not a lot of kids get to say that their dad caught bad guys. When we were younger, we always won the "my dad could beat up your dad" debates, probably because ours had a gun. One time, someone asked Ash who would win in a fight, you or the school resource officer. You were pretty pleased that she said, "My dad. My dad outranks him." And even when you weren't working, we had a million reasons to admire you, especially when you were sick and you managed to keep everything as normal as possible. As you got sicker and reality got harsher, we still couldn't believe how you held it together and fought through the pain and fear, how you still had an incredible sense of humor through it all, and you were still cracking fart jokes. You rarely complained. Watching you battle cancer with the strength you did motivates us to battle with our grief in the same way. But Dad, how do we tell them how much we miss you? How we have this cargo short, graphic tee, Bart Simpson slipper wearing dad-sized hole in our hearts? Losing you when we are just teenagers is devastating. Not only do we mourn our dad, but we also mourn all the memories yet to be made with you. The milestones that we have yet to accomplish that you will not be physically present for. But behind every milestone will be your influence, the ways you impacted us, the lessons you left behind, the personality traits you embedded in us, and the passion you passed down to us, the ways you inspired and motivated us. So Dad, we think we might know what you would say right now. You'd tell us to write it in our voice. Being conventional is boring, you might say. Write from the heart. Write what you would say and say what you mean. So we think that's what we'll do. We will never be able to give a full picture of the incredible dad that we got to grow up with. Definitely not while trying to keep this short and not bore anyone listening. But we know Dad would be happy with this. He loved everything that we did and enthusiastically promoted even our lamest pieces of writing or worst pieces of art. Dad won't see us accomplish a lot of things in our lives, but we never had to question if he was proud of us. And before, and I don't think we will in the future. Even right now, we can almost feel the tug at our hair. We can almost hear him say it. Good job, Boogers. Okay, this next tribute was written by Janelle. You should never have to eulogize a man who hasn't yet seen 60. If the last 3.5 years have proved anything to me, though, it is that Dad was a fighter. I am so thankful that Dad and the family were able to travel to Newfoundland during his illness to meet my kids. Dad made memories with them that we will cherish. Sadie still talks about Grandpa's bus. Even though I grew up on the other side of the country, there are two reoccurring themes when I think about the summers that I spent in Alberta with Dad. The first theme is fun. I have so many fantastic memories. Whether it's riding the Flying Galleon over and over, or going for a Happy Meal or movie date, we always had fun. I remember one day when Brandon and I were pretty young, Dad casually told us that he had heard on the radio that an alien spaceship crashed into the water supply near the house. It just so happened to be bath day. When he opened the bathroom door, the lights were off in the bathroom, but there was an eerie yellow-green glow coming from the tub. We couldn't believe our eyes. Glow stick baths are something I do with my own kids now. The second theme that stands out to me is safety. I always felt safe with Dad. He would always make sure he was walking on the outside of the curb when we went for walks. He was also one of those parents that would put their arm across your chest when the car would need to stop suddenly, even though the seatbelt was doing just fine on its own. Dad was a protector. That was just in him. Whether he was protecting his own wife and kids or strangers in the community, it didn't matter to him. He took that role very seriously. I hope he knew I was proud of him for that. When I was trying to find some words appropriate for the difficult time we find ourselves in, I came across the Jedi Code. I know Dad would appreciate me using it here. There's no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. Until next time, Dad, may the Force be with you. I love you. I will now read a poem chosen by Brandon. He told me it brings him comfort in situations like this, and he felt it fitting to read today. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there, I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn's rain. When you awaken in the morning hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there, I did not die.
It's hard to even comment after that. It takes incredible strength to get up. This time, I'm going to invite Andrea to please come back up and share the tribute to Doug on Charmaine's behalf.
Tribute to my husband. To the strongest man I know. I want you to know how much I love you, how safe and comfortable you made me feel, and how I looked forward to seeing your face at the beginning and the end of every single day. I want you to know that I loved your unique sense of humor. You could make me laugh so hard that I'd cry, and every time I gave what you said a second thought, I burst out laughing all over again. I want you to know that you are my pride and joy, as my best friend, as my husband, as a father, and as a cop. I want you to know, Sergeant Enns, that I am so proud of the policeman you were. I've heard so many wonderful things about you from your members and detachment, staff, and superiors, past and present, that you were an outstanding boss, stood up for the little guy, a great coach and mentor, courageous and dedicated. Your boss said you were a true leader and an inspiration. You were an incredible police officer, just as I told you long ago that you would be. I want you to know how much I appreciated when you would send me flowers and all the heartfelt messages you would write me, like the notes you sent me after your brain surgery. Thanks for saving my life and for sharing your recliner with me. I want you to know that as a father, you brought laughter, fun, and so much joy to our children's lives. I want you to know that you are our rock. We love you for all your support and encouragement and the confidence you instilled in us. You made each one of us feel like you were our biggest fan. We often come to you for guidance, especially when we need your assistance with writing almost anything. Writing was a special gift of yours. I want you to know how much I appreciated that you were the fun, cool, and hip parent, yet a bit nerdy. The girls loved that about you. I want you to know that I promised to always try to be as patient with our girls as you were. I promised to always keep them close and protect them, and I know that you liked it when Mama Bear's side of me roared. I want you to know that the girls and I will always remember our many trips to the cabin, the fun that we had, swimming, sandcastles, games, campfires, and the memories, so many cherished memories. I want you to know that our summer trip to Newfoundland was a highlight of our lives, and I will always welcome all of our children and grandchildren home. I want you to know that even though you've been jokingly referred to as antisocial in the past and the one who wouldn't join the social club, and you are such a homebody, I hope you are looking down on us and can see all the people you have brought together today and how much you were loved. You have faced many challenges, but none so harsh as in the last few years. I have felt such heartache and sorrow watching the cancer take and strip away a part of you. I want you to know that I will be forever grateful to have been able to stay home to care for you, to hold your hand, and to walk with you as you so bravely fought this horrific disease, just as I promised that I would long ago in sickness and in health. Things will never be the same without you, but the world is a better place for the years that you lived. You are my hero, and I want you to know that we will honor you and love you forever. All my love, forever and always, Charmaine.
Chaplain Matthew, if you could please come up and share a few words. Chaplain Matthew was at hospice in Doug's last days, and everything that I heard about you, sir, was very comforting.
Charmaine, Ashley, and Alyssa, Deanna, and family, I am beyond honored to be here with you today. Charmaine, when you called me a few weeks ago and asked if I would consider being part of this gathering, I honestly felt very overwhelmed. I know you guys love Doug so much, and I got to see that as you were at the hospice. To the whole family and friends who are gathered here today and coworkers, thank you for allowing us into this moment of your grief and mourning. I know for speaking for this family, and it's already been said, thank you for coming here today. That means so much. Something I say to families and friends often in this moment is I want to encourage you to do something. Not right now, because we just told you to put your cell phones away, but later find your cell phone, find the app that tells you your reminders, and set a reminder 6 months, a year and a half from now. And if you're old school and you still have that old calendar at home, that's fine. Write it down there as well. But when that reminder comes up, could you please reach out to one of these family members you know and ask them the simple question, how are you doing since Doug died? So many people think that we might be bringing up something for them or making them sad, but I can tell you they're already there, and they want to hear, and they want to tell the story, and they want to hear from you. And so do that, and you'll be doing the greatest service to them you can. As you have heard, my role in Doug's life was towards the end of his life. As the chaplain at Foy Lacombe, I meet people in a very different way. If you've ever found yourself in a hospital, you will find that that team there is doing their best to get you healed and to hopefully get you home. But when you come to hospice, our team comes with a very different goal. It can be a very different experience coming into our building. And we are there to assist with the end of one's life. And our heart is to help someone to be comfortable and to foster important moments of meaning, personal reflection, and connection with their family. I had the joy and privilege of spending time with Doug many, many different times, and his family as I loitered with intention, and Charmaine and I would spend, for some reason it was beside that big piano, we'd often spend a lot of time talking. We should have just grabbed a chair, it would have been more comfortable. But we had lots of times to share and to talk with one another. And today I just want to share with you 3 lessons that I learned from Doug's life that surround the word invitation. The first one was invitation to connection. I still remember the first day that I heard that Doug had been admitted. I usually always just kind of walk by and make myself known and introduce myself, and I saw this man sitting in one of the chairs, and I thought, oh, Doug must be in the washroom, Doug must be getting a bath, because most of our residents tend to be in a bed. And so I went back to the nursing desk and said, Doug's not there, it must be his family. And they said, no, that's Doug. Oh, okay. So I went back and introduced myself to him. And almost immediately when I met Doug, he said, grab a seat, sit down. And we were able to just start the conversation right away. And from that first visit, and many of our staff remarked the same thing, we felt a deep warmth from Doug. The invitation was always open to come and to sit down, have a chair, and to connect. And as you heard, he was always busy working on a Lego set, and I love Lego, so we connected on that, model cars and more. And I had to get used to listening to Doug talk while I could hear Fox News in the background as well, telling me about what one person did or did not do. And so I really had to learn how to tune in to what Doug was saying. But I felt a genuine connection with Doug. He was always willing to go deep about his thoughts and his feelings, about his long journey that he had with cancer, his experiences with being an RCMP officer, and his deep love for his family. We developed a very unique connection. We even had plans to play a joke on Charmaine. One day, I came into his room, and he kind of looked up at me, and he said, "Oh, Padre." And he chuckled to himself, and I said, "Why are you laughing?" And he says, "Well, I was told by Charmaine that I shouldn't call you Padre, that you might not like that." And I said, "Well, you can call me whatever you want." And so we had devised a plan that next time him and Charmaine were there together, I would come in, he would call me Padre, and I would play it up, saying how offended I was and how that wasn't a nice thing to say. But Doug also really invited others to connect. So many of our staff would be serving him and helping him with all sorts of different needs, and there was always a deep sense of invitation. The next thing we learned from Doug was an invitation to change. I was always struck by how Doug navigated the constant changes in his life. From the physical changes to his body because of the cancer, to the emotional changes that come with a palliative diagnosis, and his changes, his cognitive abilities as well. He would show me his cell phone and say, "Look what I texted. It doesn't make sense, does it?" And I said, "No, it sure doesn't." But Doug seemed to roll with the punches. Not only was he willing to change at times, but he was also willing to have grace for others who were experiencing change. One staff member at Foy Lacombe told me that Doug seemed to have kindness in his eyes, and I would also resonate with that observation. But from what I've heard, I believe that Doug lived like this. Of course, he wasn't perfect, but there was a kindness in his eyes, a desire to see beyond the mistakes, pain, or suffering, and to see a person who needs a hand. And it seemed that even in his policing career, Doug looked to be an agent of positive change. And I hope that we would all take that lesson as we go into this world. And the final lesson that we learned from Doug is an invitation to hope. Throughout my visits with Doug, I noticed that there were a few favorite t-shirts. Of course, Star Wars being one of the staples, but also a Van Halen t-shirt. And one day I explored the topic with him. I said, "So, you like Van Halen?" And he said, "Yeah, I really like his music," but he also shared that he liked Wolfgang Van Halen, which is Van Halen's son. I had no clue that Van Halen had a child and that he was also making music. So I mentioned to Doug, I said, "Next time I come by, I'll bring a Bluetooth speaker and we'll listen to one of those songs." When that time came, I asked Doug, "Which one would you like me to listen to?" And he says, "Well, just pick one." And so we listened to a song called "Distance." It was a powerful song, and I remember telling Charmaine after Doug's passing, what a strange moment to be listening to a song that was written from a man whose father died, Van Halen died, and Wolfgang wrote this song for his father. We had a deep conversation that day about life, death, and the hope in the midst of it all. And I was always reminded that even how, in my tradition, how Jesus showed hope in the darkest moments. Even as he prepared for his own crucifixion, Jesus says these words, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me." And I saw that in Doug, that he had comfort even in those difficult moments. He seemed to express that even in those last few weeks. Even in the midst of this difficult season, he seemed to have peace. And I hope that we can all find that hope and challenges as we face these moments in our life. Doug Enns was an incredibly special person who I only had a short period of time to get to know and to journey with, and I'm grateful for his influence on my life. I speak for many of the staff who are tuning in today that we were all touched by his influence. It became very evident when Doug was getting close to the end. It's our tradition at Foy Lacombe that in the same way that we welcomed him in, we're going to walk him out. And I remember telling Charmaine that this was our practice, and I felt to ask her, "Charmaine, do you think any of his RCMP members would join us?" And of course, Charmaine, being Charmaine, got right on it and sorted it out and found out that yes, they would join us. And it was an absolutely beautiful and very emotional send-off as we had uniformed officers help walk Doug out of the building. And then, of course, as you heard, bringing him right to the funeral home. Many of our staff, including myself, expressed many tears. So I shared these 3 lessons today. And as you've already heard and you will hear as you gather and chat together today, that there's lots we can learn from Doug. And that I would encourage you, share what you have experienced from Doug with the family. Maybe not today, that might be a busy day, but let them know how he influenced you. It will speak so much to them. So I'll close with playing that very song by Wolfgang Van Halen that Doug and I listened to just a few short weeks ago. A song that we listened together that I believe hammers down the point again and again that no matter what the distance is, I will be with you. Doug is not with us, and yet in many ways, he is still with us. And I have to warn you, this is a bit of a rocky song to have at a celebration of life. And Charmaine asked me, what do you think? And I said, let's play it. And so enjoy this song as you listen.
I'm so happy you found a place that's better for you than this rock we're living on. I'm so nervous, don't know my place. A life without you, I'm not ready to move on. No matter what the distance is, I will be with you. No matter what the distance is, you'll be okay. I'm so tired, can't see your face. My memory of you slowly fades when I go on. I'm still crying, don't want this place. World without you, I don't think I'll ever move on. No matter what the distance is, I will be with you. No matter what the distance is, I will be with you. No matter what the distance is, I will be with you. No matter what the distance is, you'll be okay. No matter what the distance is, I will be with you. No matter what the distance is, I will be with you. No matter what the distance is, I will be with you. No matter what the distance is, you'll be okay. Oh, yeah. No matter what the distance is, I will be with you. No matter what the distance is, you'll be okay. No matter what the distance is, I will be with you. No matter what the distance is, you'll be okay. No matter what the distance is, you'll be okay. I'm so happy, found a place.
You know, the hard part of being up here is that you can't hide. So I promise I'm only going to take a couple minutes to share with you guys. Somebody thought that I was going to be up here for 45 minutes, but I actually said 4 to 5. So everybody can relax. It's all good. I asked Charmaine to pick a portion of scripture that I could share to best describe Doug. And we came to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 to 4. And it reads, "To everything there is a season, a time for every matter or purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance." Although there is a time for all things, what we often wish for is more of it. And in conversations with others, you will often hear phrases like, "We should get together sometime," or "I wish I had more time off. It's the summertime after all. I didn't have enough time to ... fill in the blanks." Our lives literally revolve around time. The clock tells us when to get up, when to leave for work, when to make supper, when to put the kids to bed. Time governs everything under the sun. The Bible uses the ant, not an ant as in like a family member, but as in the insect, as an example of understanding times and seasons, referring to the ant as having wisdom. It says, "Consider her ways and be wise, which having no chief, overseer, or ruler, provides her food in the summertime and gathers her supplies in the harvest." The point is that there is great wisdom in knowing what season you are in and living your life accordingly. As we are gathered here today, we are surrounded with the hard truth that Doug's time on this earth has come to an end, and it has brought about a new season. I want to encourage us all to embrace this time, to look around this room and to the many people watching online, that we are in the season of loss together, the season that holds us in tension as we both celebrate and grieve. We laugh and we cry. We will offer comfort and hope and even times of laughter to each other as we reflect on how his life touched ours. When we are alone, I encourage you to sit in the stillness, to honor the pain, and to know that when it feels overwhelming, peace will come again. Just breathe. There will be joy, there will be tears, there will be many emotions, because if you are here today, you've had the privilege of doing life with Doug, of enjoying his dry sense of humor, which we've heard lots of. The fact that he liked Monty Python says it all. That and being known for his dad jokes. For those that he worked with, he's seen your value and inspired you to be your best, to be in a workforce surrounded by the darkness of humanity, and to remain a beacon of hope in society that justice is worth fighting for. He lived generously, giving of himself to those around him, taking the time to be the cool dad to his girls, always interested in what they had going on, and making the time to show up for their events. You see, Doug knew a great secret, the power of time. And I told Charmaine that when I was putting this all together, I had a picture of a windmill. And time would be representing the wind. So Doug stood in his place of life and knew how to harness the time he was given to empower the world around him. He used his time well to bring joy and encouragement to those around him, to love his family deeply and with great intention, and to defend those that could not defend themselves. So today, when this service is done and we leave this place, I encourage us all to seize the day, to live with purpose, to be better, to do better, and spend our lives truly living, to use our time wisely. We're going to turn our attention to the screens as we're going to enjoy a slideshow that has been put together by Ashley.
Feel it in my finger, I feel it in my toe. Love is all around me, and so the feeling grows. It's written on the wind, it's everywhere I go. Oh, yes, it is. So if you really love me, come on and let it show. I see your face before me as I lay on my bed. I cannot get to thinking of all the things you said. Oh, yes, I did. You gave your promise to me, and I give mine to you. I need someone beside me in everything I do. Oh, yes, I do. You know I love you, I always will. My mind's made up by the way that I feel. There's no beginning, there'll be no end. 'Cause all my love, you can depend. Gotta keep it moving. Ooh, it's written in the wind. Oh, everywhere I go. Yeah. Well, so if you really love me, come on and let it show. 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 Come on and let it show, baby. Come on and let it show.
Sorry, I had to sneak out so I could watch it as well. Well done, Ashley. So directly following today's service, A light lunch and refreshments will be provided. After the immediate family proceeds into the fellowship hall, I welcome all other family members to join, followed by remaining guests. If I could please invite Dan Sudart to come to the stage.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Sutart, and it is my honor to give Doug's final roll call. Before I do, if I could just take a couple quick minutes to describe to you what it was like working with Doug at our first posting back in Ponoka in 2001. I know we're so old. We've all heard about Doug's writing skills. He was a phenomenal writer. He is tremendous at prose. And he could write anything under the sun. And you've all heard of his police blotters and his just amazing writing ability. The greatest piece of writing he ever submitted, you've probably never heard of, because it was the report he wrote the day after he was hot dogging with his police car and drove it through the wall of a hotel and parked it on someone's bed. Now, for any one of us to try and articulate this, that would be pretty challenging, but not for Doug. I read this report, and it was amazing prose about how he was chasing the world's most dangerous criminal through terrible weather with a poorly put together police car that clearly wasn't up to snuff. And the city really shouldn't have allowed the hotel to have been built so close to the road. And I read the report and I said, yeah, that makes sense. That's not his fault at all. When you're young in service, at all of 23, 24 years old at the time, you make a lot of mistakes in your first couple of years on the job. And I was known as a bit of a practical joker. And one day, I played a prank that did not go over very well at all. In fact, it stunk, and the detachment commander was furious. Nobody knew who was responsible. But Doug, being a trained investigator, he knew what was coming down the pipe. And Doug pulled me aside, and he said, Dan, I'm not saying you did this, and I'm not saying you didn't either. But if you did, get into that corner office and take your lumps like a man, because if you don't, this is going to be way worse. And I contemplated what Doug said, and I thought, man, this sucks, but I gotta do this. And I marched into the corner office, confessed my sins, and thankfully the fallout wasn't nearly as bad as what it could have been. And the reason I say that is because Doug knew exactly what was going to happen. And he cared about his people enough to get in front of it and to give you that sage advice that you needed when you're a dumb 23-year-old, because he cared about you. So, on that note, I can do this. OCC control to Sergeant Douglas Enns, regimental number 48043. You are 1035 for the last time. Your watch has ended. Rest in peace, brother. We will take it from here. Thank you.
Father, we commit unto you the soul of our dearly departed husband. Father, grandfather, son, brother, uncle, and friend, Douglas Enns. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and the imperishable eternal spirit return to you. Amen. All rise.
There's a time and place for everything, for everyone. We can push with all our might, but nothing's gonna come. Oh no, nothing's gonna change. And if I ask you not to try, oh, could you let it be? I wanna hold you and say we can throw this all away. Tell me you won't go, you won't go. You have to hear me say I can't stop loving you. And no matter what I say or do, you know my heart is true. Oh, I can't stop loving you. You can change your friends, your place in life. You can change your mind. We can change the things we say and do anytime. Oh no, but I think you'll find that when you look inside your heart, oh baby, I'll be there. Yeah, hold on. It's a little bit funny, this feeling inside. I'm not one of those who can easily hide. I don't have much money, but boy, if I did, I'd buy a big house where we both could live. If I was a sculptor, but then again, no, or a man who makes potions in a traveling show. I know it's not much, but it's the best I can do. My gift is my song, and this one's for you. And you can tell everybody this is your song. It may be quite simple, but now that it's done, I hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind that I put down in the words how wonderful life is while you're in the world. I sat on the roof and kicked out the moss. Well, a few of the verses, well, they've got me quite cross. But the sun's been quite kind while I wrote this song. It's for people like you that keep it turned on. So excuse me for getting, but these things I do, you see, I've forgotten if they're green or they're blue. Anyway, the thing is, what I really mean, yours are the sweetest eyes I've ever seen. And you can tell everybody this is the song. It may be quite simple, but now that it's done, I hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind that I put down in the words how wonderful life is while you're